The M2 medium tank, produced by Rock Island Arsenal in 1939, was an American attempt at creating a modern armored vehicle before World War II. Despite its innovative features including a 37mm gun, multiple machine guns, and sloped armor, it was quickly deemed obsolete compared to contemporary European tanks. Consequently, the M2 was primarily used for training rather than combat. Its design elements, such as suspension and powertrain, influenced later more successful US tanks like the M3 Lee and M4 Sherman. Although it never saw battle, the M2 played a crucial role in preparing American tank crews for future engagements, laying the groundwork for advancements in US armored vehicle technology. Hello and welcome to the Bobi and Tanks YouTube channel, and enjoy this video. The M2 medium tank was produced by the Rock Island Arsenal in 1939, just before the beginning of World War II. A total of 112 units were made, including 18 M2 tanks and 94 slightly improved M2A1 tanks. However, looking at the war in Western Europe, the Americans quickly realized that the M2 was outdated, and therefore, as you probably guessed with your infinite wisdom, they wisely kept it out of overseas action. But it wasn't completely useless yet, as it served for training throughout the war. The M2 had several distinctive features, including an almost absurd and overprotectively large number of machine guns, bullet deflector plates, because why not, and sloped armor on the front hull. Its main weapon was a 37mm gun with 32mm armor. Some features of the M2, like its suspension and powertrain, were used in later US tank designs, including the M3 Lee, M4 Sherman, and other armored fighting vehicles. Now let's begin with the M2's history. The T1 was the initial contemporary infantry tank design, with the cavalry previously having the M1 combat car. Developed by Rock Island Arsenal, the primary US federal heavy arsenal responsible for setting the standards. The T1 was introduced in 1934 and shared similarities with British Vickers 6-ton Mark E, particularly in the suspension, which consisted of two quadruple bogies. Following the T1 came the T2 prototype, and then the T2E1, which featured new VVSS suspensions and a new, taller hull design, tall enough to make any skyscraper jealous. This prototype served as the foundation for the M2 light tank by 1935. The creation of American medium tanks was influenced by a defense strategy outlined in law from the 1920s. Medium tanks were created to support the infantry's advance and help them penetrate enemy defenses. Out of various experimental vehicles and prototypes developed during this time, the T4 medium tank was the only one produced in limited quantities. Due to the consistently limited budgets during that time and the concept of maximizing use of existing components, the Rock Island Arsenal created a new medium tank, the medium tank T5, in 1938. Numerous parts were sourced from the M2 light tank, which was already being manufactured. It deviated from the multi-turret design popular for infantry support tanks in the 1920s, but still emphasized fitting numerous stand-alone machine guns in the vehicle. Due to this factor, the T5 was armed to the teeth with 6 30-caliber machine guns positioned to allow firing in every direction except the fifth dimension. The tank also featured a 37mm cannon in the turret that could rotate in all directions like an office chair. The initial 250 horsepower Continental engine was less than impressive. It was so underwhelming that they had to create 2 more engines, including the T5 Phase 2 with a different engine than the T5 Phase 3 with a 350 horsepower Wright radial engine. The second one was constructed as a sample version and underwent testing until June 1939. The vehicle was then introduced as the medium tank M2. Let's talk further about the M2's design. Rock Island Arsenal began developing a new medium tank based on the M2 light tank design. Initially called the T5, it was redesignated as the M2 medium tank in June 1939 after being equipped with a 350 horsepower or 975 radial engine, which gave a top speed of 42 km an hour or 26 miles per hour. The first 18 units were produced and evaluated by the Army. Following this, the upgraded M2A1 version was approved, featuring a redesigned turret and a more powerful engine. The M2 medium tank was essentially a larger clone of the M2 light tank, sharing many components and design elements such as tracks, vertical volute spring suspension, which were later used in the M3 and M4 medium tanks. Its externally mounted twin-wheeled bogies saved internal space, so you could theoretically host a tea party in there. Or, well, not really, because looking at this view, it's very tight in there. Its rubber-bushed and rubber-shod tracks were durable enough for roads, but probably not so great for, actual combat. Now let's take a look at another important component of any tank really, the armament. As I mentioned before, the M2 medium tank has more machine guns than a paranoid action hero. Not surprising, to be honest. I mean, it's an American, so what would you expect? The M2 had a tall superstructure equipped with a machine gun mounted on a sponson in every corner. Furthermore, the driver also operated 2 additional machine guns mounted in the glacis plate. 2 more 30 caliber machine guns could be positioned on pintlets on both sides of the turret to be used against aircraft, adding to the total of 9 machine guns on the tank. At the top of the superstructure was a compact rotating turret equipped with a 37mm gun M3 and a machine gun attached to it. The 37mm gun could pierce through 46mm of armor sloped at 30 degrees at 500 yards, which are 460 meters, or through 40mm armor at 1000 yards, which are 910 meters. This setup was a mix of sponson-mounted weapons of the Mark 8 Liberty tank and the common turreted cannon, coaxial machine gun and glacis-mounted machine gun in World War II tanks. The crew included a tank commander, driver and 4 gunners, one for every time you complained about it not having enough gunners. The vehicle had storage space for 200 rounds of 37mm ammo and up to 12,250 rounds of 30 caliber ammo. Production history of the M2. Chrysler was assigned to oversee the new Detroit Arsenal tank plant, where they were set to produce the M2. The US government ordered 1,000 vehicles on August 15, 1940, to be manufactured at a rate of 100 tanks per month and delivered by August 1942 at a set price of $33,500 per tank. But due to the war in Europe, it became clear that the M2 was outdated, leading the government to change the contract before production started. Instead of producing M2 medium tanks, the factory will manufacture 1,000 M3 medium tanks after their design is completed. During the period of time, the Rock Island Arsenal manufactured 94 M2A1 tanks until August 1941, with 88 of them being completed in the same year. The M2A1 had improved armor and a larger turret compared to the original M2, utilizing the turret from the M3 light tank and featuring a gun-mantlet armor thickness of 2 inches, which are 51mm. Now, after all this talk, let's look at how the M2 was actually used during World War II. Operational history. Brace yourself for the M2's thrilling combat history. It never actually saw battle. It did not perform well in comparison to current European tanks like the French S-35 and the German Panzer III. The M2's 37mm main gun was on par with the Panzer III, but fell short compared to the S-35's 47mm gun. As the German upgraded to a 50mm gun for the Panzer III and the Soviets introduced the superior T-34 tank with a 76mm gun, the M2 was considered a temporary solution until the arrival of newer and better M3 Lee and M4 Sherman tanks in 1942 and 43. In January 1942, the Ordnance Office advised that the M2 should only be used for training and therefore was never deployed to combat zones abroad. The same fate befell the M2A4 tanks, except for a few that saw action in Guadalcanal, with the US Marine Corps and 36 of them in North Africa with the British Army's 7th Hussars and 2nd Royal Tank Regiment later sent to India for the Burma campaign. The M2 and M2A1 were used by the US Army with the 67th Infantry Regiment and later the 69th Armor Regiment of the 1st Armored Division during training exercises in the US in 1941. The M2 remained valuable for training tank crew members, and those trained in the 69th Armored were assigned to help form new armored units as US forces grew from 1942 to 1944. The deployment of the M3 Lee stemmed from the necessity of creating a new medium tank that could rival the German Panzer IV's 75mm turret gun, resulting in the initial design of mounting a 75mm gun in the right sponson. This setup was analyzed on an M2. The test vehicle was labeled T5E2. In conclusion, the M2 medium tank was the military equivalent of a starter car, Good for learning the basics, but you would never want to take it out on the highway. Anyways, that was all I had to say for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you think I said anything that is not right, or you think I should have added any additional information to this video, please let me know in the comments and share your knowledge. Besides that, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.
Target hit.